Welcome to Trifecta Collective, Finding the Root, where we dive deep into understanding and addressing root causes of chronic health issues so you can help and find healing inside and out, now and forever. Hello, and welcome to Trifecta Collective, Finding the Root. I'm Megan Abbott, owner and founder of the holistic health practice Trifecta Collective. Welcome to the podcast. So today I want to do a deep dive into mold testing or mycotoxin testing for the body specifically. And I know we've talked about this before in other podcast episodes on mold, and I really felt like we just get so many questions. There's so much confusion. And by the way, there's also a lot of confusion among practitioners, and I am currently working on some really in-depth, amazing resources that are going to be geared towards practitioners, and there will be a version available, or it might be the same one. We haven't quite decided, available to the public as well. And then we will have one for our specific clients as well that share some other things that we're doing. But I've been really deep in the weeds, in the mold weeds, if we want to call it, for several weeks now as I'm putting all of these resources together. I do plan on doing another episode just on the environmental side because I've done a lot more research. I've done some additional trainings, specifically on the environmental side that I think, once again, I had some background, I had some knowledge. I definitely, and if you've ever talked to me, I will very upfront, like I'm not the expert when it comes to these things. And I am learning, and I have learned a lot more on the environmental side. I've considered myself an expert for several years now, and us as a practice have for several years now mold experts for the body. And just now having some space and desire to get into more of the environmental side. But today it's specifically going to be about the body. How do we test for the body? What do we prefer, and why do we prefer it? Super important. And also, once again, education is power. And I want to talk through why these other tests that are available, why certain practitioners are commonly using them. And I'm going to be really transparent about how a lot of practitioners work for reference, and also how we work, because I think this is important to understand before deciding if you ever want to work with a practitioner, or you are a practitioner and you're trying to figure out how you want to run your business. I think this is all really important information to decide on. And once again, there is no right or wrong way when it comes to a lot of these things. When it comes to mold testing, arguably, there is a right and a wrong way, or several ways to do this, and there are some less effective ways to do this. So before I dive into this, once again, if you are a regular listener, apologies in advance. You've heard me talk about this a lot. Mold is not something that is talked about in great detail or depth in any training that I am familiar with for licensed or unlicensed practitioners. And we are an unlicensed practice. If you work with a nurse practitioner, an ND, they would be licensed practitioners. However, once again, I have not seen. I'm always open and would love, if you are someone who knows of one of these programs, please let me know, because I'm always looking for more information on how this kind of information is presented, and where it is presented, and the depth of information presented. But as far as I'm aware, there's no great trainings that cover full spectrum health, functional health, holistic health, that also do a great job with mold. And many of them don't touch on it for reference. So where do we get this information? Well, there's a handful of courses out there. Typically, people are going to start with one of the big ones. I'm not going to name them, but there are two specifically. One is a very, very common protocol. It starts with an S. If you want to do your research, you can. So there's that one, and I will tell you that is where I started. And man, did I see some harm happen among patients. They were not with me personally, but just following those very strict and very rigid protocols, I saw more harm than good happen. There's another woman who, or another practitioner who also does a lot of work in the mold space. She has a book. Uh, she has a lot of resources. Last name starts with a C. And once again, I just some of the information I think is great, and some just don't love. I will tell you personally, I have a real problem of really buying into people who say like you have to start here, and then they created their own product, uh, and they're the only product on the market that can do this, or they're the best product on the market anywhere. I have a really hard time with those individuals because I do think a lot of people in this space, when they get big enough, they sell out a little bit. Is really where I want to call it. And we've seen it with a lot of the big names that started within this industry. And I will tell you, I've made some changes on opinions on a lot of these big people in the space, people who I once greatly respected, basically gone. And I have barely any respect for a lot of these people because they are training other practitioners in a garbage way. They are selling garbage products. They are only trying to upsell a bunch of testing, a bunch of supplements, a bunch of restrictive diets that aren't usually the best for the vast majority of people. And I'm seeing, once again, I went through this process. I went through this industry personally, and there's a reason why we run our practice the way we do. We don't make money off of testing. I refuse. I refuse to make money off of testing. I will not do it. We charge what the lab charges us. We charge the same. And we go through a couple of different companies depending on what tests we're running. We try and find the most affordable routes for all of these things with supplements. We do not white label supplements. We do not have any of our own supplements. I have no interest in any of that. And once again, I don't believe in some of these things. I don't believe in putting people on 20, 25, 30, 35 plus supplements. I think that's going to do more harm than good. So the reason I share this information is because this is not how most practices work. Neither right nor wrong. And it very much can influence the recommendations of practitioners. Take that information, do what you want with it, and once again, I just ask questions before you start working with someone. Ask questions about why they do what they do, what courses they've taken. I mean, even blood work. I'm seeing garbage information about blood work and how to interpret labs. People just using AI for all this kind of stuff. And there's all kinds of apps that are coming out now, and they are not, even the good ones, cannot replace a human. And if you're not being able to understand where someone's getting these ranges and information, and if there is good, valid information as to why this is happening, the whole like vitamin D should be 80 to 100, like please share that information. Like ferritin over 150, like please share those studies with me because I have not seen them. All of the studies I have seen do not support that information. That is sometimes very rampant in the functional health space. So I say this is the information I have gathered and we have information and then also the practical experience. We've worked with hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of clients at this point over the years that have mold issues, mycotoxin illness, mold toxicity, whatever we want to call it. Yes, there is a difference between mold and mycotoxins, and I'm probably not going to get into it on this podcast episode. Yes, but I do realize there is a difference between those, and they are not interchangeable. And I also always try and talk in plainer English. Obviously trying to get ahead of comments that we have gotten in the past around some of this content. So this is where I'm coming at from this information. So when we're looking at mycotoxins specifically, and mycotoxins, there are certain molds, toxigenic molds, that can then produce mold toxins, toxic molds. And these can settle within the body and make us incredibly sick. And women are going to be impacted sooner and faster and typically more intensively than men. Children fall into that same category as women, where they're typically, we may even see some shifts, some changes in them first before we can see it in the adults. That's because their bodies are just more sensitive and they're smaller. So, and there's some other factors that can play into that. For reference, we do not work with children. We will work with teens under certain circumstances. 16 is typically our cutoff, and we do make exceptions at times depending on the person and really what we're looking at, what issues are going on, where they are in their growth and development, all that kind of stuff really matters to us. So we take those more on a case-by-case basis. So when we look at mycotoxins in the body specifically, there are 3 main tests that are most commonly used, mycotoxin tests specifically used. And those are mycotoxin tests from Mosaic Diagnostics, Real Time Labs, and Vibrant Wellness. So 3 different companies. For reference, we have used all 3. We have done all 3 on the same person. With their consent for reference and understanding of why we're doing it this way. Or sometimes like they'll come to us, having taken one, we'll rerun one of those, and then we can see blatant differences. So Mosaic Diagnostics, if you're going to choose one of these 3, don't choose Mosaic. Love Mosaic for other tests. This is not one. You're only getting 11 different strands of mycotoxins. It misses some of the big ones, some of the more dangerous ones. And there are some that are more dangerous than others. And there are some subspecies that can be very dangerous that Mosaic just does not look for. So that's the first problem, where you may have little show up on this test. That does not mean you are not mold sick, which is why we don't recommend it. The other thing with this test, it is very insensitive, meaning that when we look at urine, when we look at a lot of these functional labs, we need to understand the pros and cons and what we're actually looking at. When we look at urine, all 3 of these mycotoxin tests are urine-based. When we're looking at urine, we get several hours worth of data, which is great. One of the big reasons why we usually prefer urine for hormone testing, because we're not getting just a moment of time, which is what blood work is. We're actually getting several hours, really it's a day's worth of information when we look at a Dutch Complete test that is a hormone test. So we're getting several hours worth of data. However, you have to be excreting the things for it to show up in the urine, which is where provoking protocols, meaning you are trying to provoke your body to push more things out ahead of time in order for them to show on the lab. I hate provoking protocols. We work with a lot of people who are very sick, who are coming to us. They have a lot of issues, and those issues are pretty widespread, especially when there's mold involved. The thought of putting someone on a protocol on one or even just 1 or 2 supplements that could cause very serious reactions for them is not a worth of risk I deem worthy of putting someone through that. I have been through it. I would never wish that on another human. I know what it's like to be so incredibly sick and nauseous, where you can't eat, like you can barely function, just like pain in your body. I refuse to put anyone potentially through that, which is why I will not do a provoking protocol, which is another reason why I don't like these first 2 tests. So mosaic needs to be provoked. It's not very sensitive except for ochratoxin A or OTA. It is very sensitive to this marker. It shows up on almost everyone. So don't love this test. I'll also tell you, if you come up on 0 for everything, like literally everything is 0 on this test, this is a big red flag for me. It does not mean you do not have mycotoxins in your body, because guess what? We all do to some extent. They should be at very low levels. So if nothing shows up, you're not pushing anything out, which screams a red flag to me. Also, what is this missing? If nothing is coming out, this is drainage pathways are probably in a pretty tough spot, meaning you're not pushing the stuff out and it's just staying and accumulating in your body, which can be particularly dangerous. Okay, so that's mosaic. So we've got 11 and not sensitive. Real time. We get 16, so we get a few more. It covers like 1 or 2 of the bigger ones that mosaic does not cover. So like better than mosaic. It is more expensive than mosaic, but there are reasons for this. So it is more expensive. Not by a ton. I can't remember the exact number off the top of my head. We don't recommend either of these tests, so I don't know the cost off the top of my head. So they're real time. You get 16. It's the tiniest bit more sensitive, but you still have to provoke, and we can still miss some things. And there's some big ones that real time misses. So that if you're gonna if there's a middle option, that's your middle option from a mycotest perspective. Then the one that we prefer is the one from Vibrant Wellness. You're getting 26 different strands. It covers all the big and the most dangerous ones. Super, super big benefit. It's also very sensitive. You should not provoke. Big red flag. If you have a practitioner who is working and ordering this Vibrant Wellness mycotoxin test and they tell you to provoke, massive red flag. They are not familiar with this test, which means how can they interpret it appropriately, let alone come up with a protocol to support your body appropriately? Big red flag. Yes, this is the most expensive one. For us, this test runs, they just changed the pricing. It's right around $530, $540. So yeah, it is pricey. Once again, if you're going to run a test, this is a specific mycotoxin test. This is the one, though. This is the safest one. This is the most comprehensive one. This is the best. Vibrant Wellness also has a couple other tests that will look at mycotoxins. I'll tell you one of my all-time favorite tests. If there's two, probably three. There's three like all-time favorite functional labs that I really love. This one that I'm about to talk about is definitely like probably number 2 or 3, and that's the total tox burden test from Vibrant Wellness. Super cool test. Really expensive. Once again, cost off the top of my head, I mean, you're looking at $650 to $750. I can't remember off the top of my head, but it's pretty pricey. So yeah, it's a pretty pricey test. And so this is basically a mycotoxin test, a heavy metal urine test, and it also looks at a variety of environmental toxins, especially plastics, PFAs, like different things like that. We get insight into that. Once again, Vibrant Wellness is a very sensitive when it comes to like toxin burden. So we don't need to provoke for this. And yeah, this is a super cool test. So if we've got kind of some extra financial resources, this is an amazing test to have run. Now, keep in mind, this is one piece of the puzzle. If you've got toxin overload issues of any sort, other parts of your body are impacted, which is why we will never just read a test alone. For any of these functional labs, we also want to have blood work with it ideally, and we also need health history. We need to know symptoms, how someone's experiencing their body. This is why we do free consults. So we get some of this baseline information, and then we can make the best recommendation that we can for testing if we need additional testing. And we have now context to look at with all of this, because we have to have the context. Otherwise, you're reading just base labs that we have optimal ranges, but optimal doesn't mean optimal to you. I've seen plenty of people. I mean, to give you an example, and I think I've shared this one before. So for me, and I'm one of our practitioners, we both have thyroid issues, a history of thyroid issues. For me, my TSH feels best closer to 2, like right around in like the 1.8 to 2.2-ish range. Like that's where my thyroid TSH feels best. For her, 1 or just under 1 is way better for her. By the way, those are both an optimal range. 1 to 2.5 is typically what we're using for TSH from an optimal perspective. We're technically both in that range. She's on the low end, I'm on the higher end. That's where we both feel best. Context matters. It's a big deal. So this total tox burden test from Vibrant Wellness is also great. Big fan. They have some other tests. They have a toxin zoomer test that I honestly have never run for anyone, or maybe once or twice. I don't think it's worth the money. It's almost $1,000, and it's not giving us enough and more information that I deem it to be worth an extra $200 to $300 from some of the or more, depending on the test. So that is available. It's not our favorite though. So the Vibrant Wellness mycotoxin test or total tox burden test, great tests. Even if you are pretty healthy and you're like, I just like really want to do a deep dive, this total tox burden test is a really good test to look at, just to understand what is in your body. Once again, if you have a lot of financial resources going into trying to get pregnant, also an amazing test to get done, because you can pass a lot of this stuff on to your child. Both parties, by the way, very valuable test to have run. So I would say especially for the mother, and definitely not exclusively just for the mother, because both parties, their health both matters in pregnancy and how the child develops, and then the birth, all of these things here. So all of it matters. Here's also why this is typically not our starting point for most people. There are other tests that I'm going to talk about more towards the end that we prefer, because mold doesn't come by itself. Toxin load never comes by itself. Blood work can give us a lot of other really good information. There's some other information that can be really valuable to help us, especially when we're coming up with a starting point with where do we start in putting a protocol together? What does this look like nutritionally? Do we do a low histamine diet? Do we do a low oxalate diet? Do we need to do a low sulfur diet? What do we need to do here? Supplements, lifestyle things, movement, what else? How's your mitochondrial health? How's your cellular health? How's your adrenal health? How's your nervous system? How is your blood sugar regulated? All of this matters. Where are your drainage pathways? Where are nutrient deficiencies? All of this stuff matters. And these toxin tests, toxin load testing, gives us some of that information, but it doesn't give us a full picture. So this is why for many people in the mold space, they're going to recommend one of these, but also typically at least one other test. This might be a stool test in some cases. This might be the organic acids test in other cases. And sometimes I know some practices recommend the Vibrant Wellness mycotoxin test, the Mosaic Diagnostic Organic Acid Test, and the Vibrant Wellness Gut Zoomer Test. It's a lot of money up front that I don't think most people have. Because remember, that's just the upfront test. What about reruns of the test? What about a protocol? What about support during that protocol? This is where our practice really does differ, because we take all of that into consideration. And I try as best as possible in 30 minutes with a free consult to share all of this information. And this is also why we're putting together some of these additional resources, because 30 minutes is not enough time to talk about this. And, I can't give away all of my time for free, as much as I would really love to. This is my full-time job. This is my only job. This is how I support myself. This is like the main way we support our family. And by the way, I'm not off on a yacht because I make millions and millions of dollars. I'm not trying to rip people off. Like, our pricing, we try and keep it so reasonable and so in the middle, even though we are a very, very highly specialized practice and we get amazing results. I've really tried to keep our pricing very middle of the road as much as possible. Once again, not upcharging for testing, not trying to upcharge for supplements. We try and give supplement discounts as much as we possibly can. And all of that really, really matters to me. And I'm sure if I did it a different way, we would be making a whole bunch more money. And I would feel like a horrible person. So I'm not willing to do that. Okay, so those are the three main mycotoxin tests. The other probably really big one in this space is the MyMycoLab. This is one that people can have a really hard time with. And they're like, no, this is the test. MyMycoLab, like they know what they're talking about. They do all the mold things. Like they know exactly what they're talking about. Okay, so this is looking at serum antibodies. This is a serum antibody test. This test is looking at the immune reaction to mycotoxins. I'm going to say that again. This is looking at the immune reaction to mycotoxins. It is not looking at mycotoxin levels. Not a bad test. Once again, not a bad test. However, it's not actually looking at what is in the body. It is looking at the immune response to this and how the immune system is reacting. Here's the real problem. The immune system, when we have mycotoxin issues, mycotoxins by themselves impact the immune system significantly. We also know mycotoxins also can be a massive contributor to mast cell issues and mast cell dysregulation. And if your practitioner does not know what mast cells are, run so fast. Because if they're not well versed and well trained in mast cell issues, they should not be working with mold sick clients. So mast cells are immune cells. When these immune cells, which we all have, and we all have them throughout our entire body, and we've done plenty of episodes on mast cells and histamines. I did a whole 2-hour masterclass on mold mast cells and histamines. Like there's a super, super, super strong connection between all three of these things. But when these immune cells are turned on, when these mast cells, these immune cells are turned on from stressors, variety of stressors, mycotoxins are a massive stressor in the body. So we've got these mycotoxins, they're in our body. They then are turning on these immune mast cells. When these mast cells are chronically turned on, they're designed to turn on and off, just like our nervous system. Our nervous system is not supposed to be always on or always off. It's supposed to be able to flow in between and turn on when it needs to, turn off. With sympathetic, parasympathetic, be more activated in certain times and then be more relaxed in other times. Very same concept with these immune cells. So these mast cells should turn on when there's a stressor and then turn off when that stressor is gone. And it's supposed to be an acute, a short-term reaction. So we may feel some cognitive shifts when this happens. We may feel, mast cells can impact our nerves and our joints, can impact our gut. They can impact our sinuses. When they're chronically turned on and dysregulated, they do release histamine as well, which is where the histamine component comes into play. But if you're only looking at the histamine piece and not the mast cell piece, big problem. Because it's not always the histamine that's actually the issue. More often, it's the mast cells that are then creating the histamine. So if you stabilize the mast cells, the histamine issues dissipate. Which is why your practitioner, if you have mold or mycotoxin issues, you need someone who understands the mast cell component to this. Also, if someone's only looking at your mast cells and not looking at why your mast cells are chronically turned on, also a big red flag. Just talked to someone about this earlier this week, and she's like, this is not a life sentence. And I go, no. This is a reaction. If we address why these cells are turned on in the first place, cells cells go back to where they're supposed to. No more mast cell issues. So these immune cells can become very dysregulated, and that is one of the telltale signs. And there's a laundry list of mast cell symptoms, mast cell dysregulation symptoms that can come along with this. But this is one of the telltale signs that we would want to test for mold and mycotoxin issues within the body. So they impact these immune cells and they chronically turn them on. So the immune system is impacted in a variety of ways when it comes to mold and mycotoxin issues. Why are we only looking at the immune reaction? Also, it can take some time for the immune system to react fully and completely. Why do we want to wait for that? Once again, there are limitations within this test too. It's not showing us, are there actually mycotoxins within the body? It's looking at the immune reaction to these, not the same. We're also missing the bigger picture of, okay, even if we do have mold in the body, where are we starting from? Where is our body starting from? It does not show this. So once again, this is not a test that we will recommend. If someone comes to us with it, yeah, we can definitely, if it comes back really bad, pretty blanket to assume that there's a mycotoxin issue, and we might still want to run an organic acids test. We may not, depending on the person and the level that this shows. We may only need blood work in addition. However, it's not something that we're going to recommend actually spending money on because I don't think it's worth it. If you're going to spend money, like pick the 1 or 2 best tests and spend your money where you're going to get the most value from this. Now, there are also people who do some other things like live blood testing, they'll like take usually it's a prick of the finger and then look at your blood under a microscope. Yeah, once again, like this is super cool, and some people can tell. I think it depends on the training of these individuals. If there is mold within that, once again, cool, great information. Doesn't give me a complete starting point of where this person is, where their body is, and what might be the most supportive way to start with this. Once again, not bad, not a complete picture. Am I going to spend money on this? Personally, no. Bioresonance scans, same kind of thing. Mold can absolutely show up. I will say mold does not show up for everyone that actually has mold issues. I've seen many people come back and I'm like, this really sounds like mold. I want to test for this. If you want to continue on the conversation, that this would be our next step, would be to test for mold issues, and they come back positive. And they did not on the bioresonance scan. So once again, a lot of different tools out there. I think there's pros and cons of each. But once again, the bioresonance scan often is not going to tell us the full scope of where your body is. Here's another problem that I really see in this space with people who use a lot of these like alternative kind of tests that we don't necessarily love, is that so mold will come back, or parasites will come back, or heavy metals will come back, and then someone tries to address all of those at the same time. They're like, okay, you got mold, so we're going to put you on activated charcoal as a binder, and we're going to do killing in the gut, and we're going to try and address the colonization within the sinuses all at once. Ugh. Someone's probably getting pretty sick. There's an order of operations that we find to be very important and very helpful in helping people continue to live their day-to-day lives and also heal. And once again, this is one of the things for me that is almost a non-negotiable. I got to the point where I felt like my life was totally disrupted between supplements and elimination diets alone, let alone like, oh, you have to do the sauna every day. You have to do coffee enemas several times a week. You have to, oh my goodness, like talk about nervous system dysregulation. By the way, if you've got mold issues, your nervous system is dysregulated. I don't even need to talk to you to tell you that. And I can guarantee there's a lot of other layers that are going to be playing into this nervous system piece. There's a lot of factors, and I have just not found over supplementing, over testing doing the extreme dieting, doing the most extreme protocols, I have not found them to be beneficial for myself or others. I'm more open to trying some of these things on myself at this point, only because I can peel through the layers and I can take pretty good educated guesses as to what is contributing to what. I've also been in some really dark, dark, painful places that I can handle it. And I hate to say that, and the reality is true. And that is where I kind of landed. If you've listened to anything about my hormone journey over the last like almost year now, not quite a year, but eight to 10 months maybe. Some of the experimentation I did for my hormones, I was willing to take those risks because I feel confident in my ability. I've done so much work on myself that even when the really deep dark thoughts came in, I'm able to separate, hey, this is why this is happening. This is not actually me. There's no chance I'm going to act on this. There's no like falling into this trap. It's short term, it's temporary, and now I know. And now I have this is information for me, and I'm just using this as data, and I'm not going to make any rash decisions based on this data. Okay, so those are some of the big ones. Here's our favorite. So the organic acids test from Mosaic Diagnostics. Once again, there's a few companies that run this test. The most comprehensive and the best one is the one from Mosaic. Once again, we are not loyal to any one company. And all the research that I have done, all the information that I have says to me that this is the best one. So this organic acid test is also a urine test. This is, you do not need to provoke. It is not recommended to provoke on this one either. Another bonus. It's also going to run about $300, give or take a few dollars for shipping. This is a really amazing test. This is definitely by far, if I had to pick one test in the functional space that I think many, many people would benefit from taking a test, this is the test. This test is 77 markers. I will also tell you, I've taken 6 courses just on this test. Not all of these trainings were great. I will tell you, the one from the company itself was one of the worst. So pick and choose. Like, once again, like, not all courses are the same. Some are like, here's an hour training on how to read this test. This is a 77 marker test. This is not an easy test or uncomplicated test to read. AI also does not do a great job looking at this test. Once again, I did a podcast episode, I think it was last summer maybe, where I did three lab tests, and I used one of the AI services and went back and forth between like my interpretation versus their interpretation. It can do some decent jobs in certain areas and not the best. So keep in mind, not all practitioners are actually trained in how to do this, let alone especially have a lot of training and experience reading this for mold and mycotoxin issues. So couple big things we're going to get out of this test. So the first major page of test results is looking at yeast, fungus, and bacterial issues. This is an amazing test. This, for me, essentially eliminates the need for a stool test, which is a huge bonus. Don't love stool testing to begin with, and this gives us some really good insight into the gut. I'll also tell you, stool testing is not great when it comes to yeast and fungal issues. It can take a very long time, and you've got to catch the right moment for the stool for yeast and fungal issues to show. It's going to show a lot faster on urine. So it's a huge bonus. We get better insight into yeast and fungal issues. Just on this first page too, we can look to see if mold is colonized within the gut. And just because it's not colonized does not mean you don't have mold or mycotoxin issues. If you are colonized, that means you've had these issues long enough that it's really these mold mycotoxins have made a home in your gut. It's warm, it's cushy, it's a lot of fluid, great areas that, and our sinuses can also get in our brain, great areas where mold likes to take home. So that's essentially what mold colonization is these mold spores, mycotoxins, have made a home in this area. If you also have chronic yeast and or fungal issues, like take this test, please. Highly, highly recommend it. It's going to show us so much information as to why this might be happening, whether there is a mold contributing factor or not. Great test. This test is also going to look at oxalate issues, which is, once again, really, really valuable information coming into whether someone may benefit more from a low oxalate diet versus a low histamine diet. And they are different. We don't love either one. And if we need to use one, having this information on oxalates can go a really long way. This also can look at heavy metals. Now, it's not going to give you like a detailed report on heavy metals, but there is one marker specifically that looks at trapped heavy metals within the body. And when this is elevated, that does give us information that there are trapped heavy metals within your body, and heavy metal issues are, or heavy metals are an issue for you. We can also get a better idea of like total toxin load within that and how your body's responding. We look at mitochondrial health, and that's cellular energy. So if you have a lot of fatigue issues, chronic fatigue issues, there's a lot of factors that can play into that. Your mitochondrial health is a big one. If your cellular health is not in a great spot, it's also really important that we address that. So this also gives us information of, do we need to do some mitochondrial support? In which case, what kind of mitochondrial support may be the most beneficial for you? Because there's not just one option when it comes to mitochondrial support. So that can be really valuable information. We look at neurotransmitter pathways. Before anyone ever goes on any sort of medications for mental and emotional health, I think this test should absolutely be run. It looks at dopamine and serotonin specifically, and some metabolites, norepinephrine, epinephrine. And it also looks at one marker called quinolinic acid, which looks at neural inflammation, so brain inflammation. Really valuable information for us to know as well. So all of this is super, super important. It also, by the way, looks at gut inflammation, leaky gut, intestinal permeability. Once again, we don't need to run a stool test to know if this is the case. It's also looking at a variety of nutrient deficiencies. A lot of your B vitamins. It looks at CoQ10, biotin, NAC, and then we get into drainage pathways, glutathione, toxin load, toxin exposure, methylation pathways, byproducts from ammonia byproducts, bacterial byproducts, different byproducts, which can also increase toxin load and disrupt drainage pathways. It looks at blood sugar regulation and how your body is breaking down fat and using that fat for fuel from a body perspective, but also from a brain perspective. And both of those are very valuable information. And I will tell you, mycotoxin issues, overload, mold illness, mold toxicity really plays a big role in this. And I'll say just toxin overload definitely plays a big role. Specifically, mold and mycotoxins plays a particularly large role in this. So it's very valuable information for us to have. And this may change our approach when it comes to how we look at your bile flow, bile duct health, and we may recommend some different supplement and or lifestyle things based on those results. It also looks at different amino acid metabolites that can tell us a few different things. It's 77 markers. If we're only going to run one test, this is the test. If we have the financial resources to run that and one other one, we're going to run the vibrant mycotoxin test. If someone has more expansive resources, we're going to run the total tox burden test and the organic acids test. And we'd want to see some blood work, whether they came in with that or we run that ourselves. It does not matter to us. Once again, we're not making money off of testing, so we don't care where it comes from. It's whatever the cheapest option is for you, and making sure we get the right testing options, because not all tests are created equal. So the reason we like this the most is because, one, I've taken enough courses that I know how to read and look for mold within this, that I don't necessarily need a specific mycotoxin test to look at this. For us as well, and once again, I've done a lot of research on this. I've done a lot of practical experience with this. There are some theories that certain mycotoxins respond better to certain binders. Yes, and also we need to take a deeper understanding and look at binders. Go back and listen to our episode on binders if you're interested in learning more about this. Many binders only work in the digestive tract and don't work systemically. And I will tell you, especially with mold and mycotoxin issues, they do not just stay in your digestive tract. They will go all over your entire body. And so we need to take that into account too. And so that's why we like more systemic type binders. If someone has a lot of toxin overload issues, like they probably also have a lot of gut issues. They probably also have a lot of issues absorbing nutrients. We don't want something that's going to further deplete nutrients if we can avoid that. And some of these selective binders that we often use in our practice enhance nutrient absorption as opposed to deplete nutrients. Another big bonus here. So that's some insight into the testing, why we do what we do, why we do what we do. And yes, we do take the financial side of things into account because how can we not? I spent a small fortune on mine, and it was, I mean, a challenging hole to dig myself out of. And once again, like if I can help and support someone not having to do that or go into a hole, great. And still heal, great. So we take all of these things into account. And I will also tell you, unfortunately, like Western medicine is not great when it comes to this. I have seen very, very few, I mean, like one or two decent Western medicine trained physicians, and they've both been immunologists, have any idea about this. I'll also tell you, if they look at mold through your blood, they're probably running an allergy test. An allergy test is not the same as mycotoxins. Once again, we're looking at immune responses and reactions to things, not what is actually within our body itself. And there's a big distinction between that. So, and then there's also some things we can look at in blood work, but we probably shouldn't only be looking at blood work when we're doing mold and mycotoxin issues. We probably also want to be looking at some other things unless it's so obvious and so apparent. And when it is really obvious and really apparent to us, we will say, look, like this is absolutely mold. And for us, like if you want to test, for sure, let's do that. And if you just want to jump in, we also feel comfortable doing that. If you've had a known mold, like pretty significant mold exposure, and you check all of our boxes, we may not need to run that test. So all things to kind of think about. If you have additional questions on this, please let us know. We will be doing more content around this podcast and other. And like I said, I am working on some other resources, like really in-depth resources here. And those will be coming out. The first one will be coming out shortly. I just have to record a few videos for it, but it is almost done. And almost all put together. So super, super excited about that. Thank you for listening. Let us know if you have questions about this. Would love to do additional content, especially with whatever kind of questions that you have around this to give you just a better understanding and education around it. Knowledge is power. The more educated we can be going into that, the better questions and the more informed and better decisions we can make for ourselves and our bodies. Because at the end of the day, it's your body, it's your choice. No practitioner should tell you you absolutely have to do this or absolutely should not do this. It is your body. And as long as there is education and a conversation around this, for us, it is very much a partnership and teamwork that we will help to give you the best education we can and make the most informed decisions. And at the end of the day, it is someone else's choice. Like it is your choice because it is your body and your life. Thank you for listening. As always, please like, subscribe, follow. If it resonates, 5-star reviews really, really, really mean the world to us. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you next week.